Report, Kaido. Rourke barked, his voice echoing through the comm system. He stood at the command console, his brow furrowed, watching the distorted sensor readings. Give me a perimeter scan. I want to know what's out there. Kaido's gruff voice responded. Nothing on visual, Cap. But I'm picking up energy spikes on the far side of Aridia. They're faint, but definitely unnatural. Kronos? Rourke pressed. Could be, Kaido replied. Or something else entirely. Rourke's gut twisted. Something else. Out here, on the edge of the galaxy, that was rarely good news. He spared a glance toward the lab, where Aella was currently absorbed in studying the outpost's ancient schematics. Keep me updated. Aye, Cap. Rourke strode through the narrow, dimly lit corridors, the hum of the station a constant companion. There was something about these old structures that put him at ease, even in the midst of danger. The station had been built to last. Even though some days it felt like everything was against him and his team, he knew if they all worked together, there wasn't anything they couldn't accomplish. The hydroponics lab was a stark contrast to the grimy corridors, a verdant oasis bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent algae. Aella was tending to the plants, her long, slender fingers tracing the delicate leaves. For a moment, Rourke simply watched her, appreciating the alien grace with which she moved. What do you see, Aella? He asked quietly. She turned, her dark eyes meeting his. Potential, Captain Rourke. This outpost has the potential to be more than just a mining station. More than just a graveyard. It's a long way from potential to reality, Rourke said, his voice tinged with cynicism. The journey begins with a single step. Aella replied, her expression unreadable. Speaking of which, what have you found out from those old files? He asked, changing the subject. He had come to value Aella's intellect. She had an uncanny ability to decipher complex systems and glean insights from seemingly useless data. The information is fragmented, incomplete, Aella said, turning back to her plants. But I have pieced together some of the larger picture. She reached out to touch the plant as she spoke. I can surmise that the Tranta array, the primary reason for this outpost, was much larger and more complex. The information revealed that it was intended to study and manipulate the subspace, where space folds in on itself due to massive gravitational pulls. Rourke frowned. Meaning? Meaning the old-timers had a hand to play with the gravity. The two spoke for what felt like hours. Aella's explanations of how they might better adapt their power grid and build better signal towers made the hours that followed so much easier. With the new plans that Aella and Rourke came up with, several of the base inhabitants spoke up and wanted to learn more. It took little convincing for Aella to show the team some of what she knew of combat. Maya used her medical equipment to increase the strength of the team so they could endure more while mining. Kai taught the team the various skills he had learned during his years as a soldier. This time of improvement brought a sense of community to the station, a change that most of the team was happy to see. But it wasn't long before the quiet time began to feel a bit like a storm was brewing. Rourke was enjoying a rare moment of quiet in his cramped quarters, staring at the small holographic image of his family that sat on his desk. His wife, Sarah, had sent it just before the collapse of the comm arrays. She and their daughter, Emily, were smiling, oblivious to the chaos that had consumed the galaxy. Rourke often wondered if he would ever see them again. He often wondered if it was the right choice to stay with his team on this hellhole, but he remembered the faces of them all. He had a duty. A piercing alarm shattered the silence. It was a priority signal, something Rourke hadn't heard in months. Captain, come to Communications Bay, stat! Silas's voice crackled with urgency. We've got a message, encrypted, but I managed to crack it. I think you're going to want to hear this. Rourke raced to the comms bay, his heart pounding in his chest. Silas, looking paler than usual, motioned him toward the console. Took me long enough, thank you, he quipped before pressing a button to play a message. The voice that followed, distorted with static, was familiar. Vance. Captain Rourke? She began, her tone icy. As of now, Outpost Ring-42 is designated a restricted zone. All incoming and outgoing communications are to cease immediately. Any unauthorized contact will be considered an act of aggression. We are en route to evaluate the situation. Compliance is expected." The transmission cut abruptly. Rourke stared at Silas, his mind reeling. "What the hell does this mean?" "I don't know, Cap," Silas said, his voice tight. "But it sounds like Kronos is closing in, and it ain't a social visit. Could be anything." Rourke thought to himself. Things were about to get a whole lot worse. The lockdown created a palpable tension within the outpost. Aella said nothing, but seemed to grow even more distant. Even the Algia was glowing a different shade. The crew, already uneasy, became increasingly paranoid. Whispers of sabotage and betrayal filled the corridors. A sense of dread and worry washed over Holt. "Are you really going to trust an alien with this, Holt?" said Kaido. Aella had a lot of faith in Holt's command of the station, but Kai's words did hit him. Could a single person's faith hold over an ideology? It seemed so unlikely to succeed. What were the chances? Rourke struggled to contain the rising tide of fear and distrust. "We can't afford to turn on each other," he said, his voice strained. "We need to stick together if we're going to get through this." "Easier said than done, Cap," Maya retorted. "Some of us have families, lives beyond this scrap heap." She glanced pointedly at Aella. "We can't risk everything for a creature we don't even understand." Rourke glared at her. "Aella has done more for this outpost than you have in years. She's one of us now. And I won't tolerate anyone treating her like an outsider." His voice had taken an edge that no one was willing to contest. His words, while firm, did little to quell the unease. Rourke knew that the crew was slowly fracturing, torn between loyalty, fear, and self-preservation. To lose command and all of his team now, just as he was finally at peace, it was too much to bear. Rourke retreated to his quarters, the weight of his responsibilities crushing him. He glanced at the holographic image of his family, his heart aching with a mixture of guilt and longing. He was still the captain. He had to do something. He had to make it work for everyone, the same as he had done every day before today. He found Aella in the observation dome, her face silhouetted against the starry expanse. She was gazing out at the void, her expression unreadable. "They don't trust me, do they?" she said quietly, without turning. Rourke sighed. "They're scared, Liara. They don't understand you." "And do you, Captain Rourke?" she asked, her voice tinged with a hint of melancholy. "Do you understand me?" Rourke hesitated. "I'm trying," he said honestly. I see your strength, your intelligence, your sense of justice. But there's a lot I don't understand." "Perhaps that is the point," Aella said, finally turning to face him. "Perhaps understanding is not always necessary. Perhaps trust is enough." Could he trust her? Rourke didn't know. But he knew he couldn't let the outpost, his team, fall apart. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. "Then we'll have to find a way," Rourke said, his voice resolute. "We'll have to find a way to trust each other. Because if we don't, we're all dead." The uneasy truce at Outpost Ring-42 began to fray. Fear, like the ever-present dust, seeped into every corner, poisoning minds and fracturing bonds. Rourke found himself constantly mediating, trying to keep the crew from tearing itself apart before Kronos even arrived. The first crack appeared with Maya. During her unauthorized scan of Aella, she stumbled upon something disturbing in her memories, a sequence of highly classified Kronos codes, linked to a project called Project Chimera. When Rourke pressed Aella about it, she shut down, her expression turning blank and unreadable. I have no memory of this project," she stated mechanically. "The data is inaccessible." Maya, distrust etched on her face, didn't buy it. "She's lying, Cap. That's Kronos' handiwork. They programmed her. Who knows what that thing's actually capable of?" Rourke, already on edge, felt his doubts resurface. Could he truly trust Aella, a creation of the very corporation that sought to exploit them all? The revelation about Project Chimera also unearthed unsettling truths about some of Rourke's own crew. Silas, as it turned out, hadn't been a mere petty con artist. He had been a data broker, selling information to the highest bidder, often to Kronos itself. But now, feeling remorseful, he approached Holt with the truth of his past. "They had me believing that I was helping people," he cried. "That my actions were all for the best, but, oh God, the blood is all over my hands, Captain. I don't know how I'm going to be able to live with it." "And what about Kai?" Liara asked one afternoon to Rourke. The two were watching Kai drill a few of the newer recruits on how to use the newly built power array. "Did you really think he was just going to forgive and forget about what happened to his squad?" Kai's face was stoic and unreadable, but Holt could swear he saw something in the corner of Kai's face. It was almost like a smirk, or even a smile. Holt could understand where he was coming from, of course. He could feel the ghosts of those he had lost. The lines that separated friend from foe, loyalty from betrayal, were blurring rapidly. The foundation of Outpost Ring-42 shook from the tremors of the past threatening to erupt. As tensions escalated, an encrypted transmission reached them from a source claiming to be part of an anti-Kronos resistance movement known as the Nebula Collective. The message urged them to resist the corporation's intrusion, promising support if they stood their ground. Rourke was wary. He didn't know whom to trust. But Kronos was closing in, and his options were dwindling. He met with a small group of his most trusted crew members, including Aella. He could sense his trust wavering, but she had gained so much of it, he thought that to let it go would only make things worse. "So, you're saying we team up with a group of rebels we know nothing about, against a megacorporation that controls half the galaxy?" Silas said, his eyes widening with mock incredulity. "Sounds like a suicide mission, Cap." "It's our only option," Rourke replied. "We can't wait for Kronos to come and pick us apart. We have to fight back." "And what makes you think this collective is any different from Kronos?" Maya asked, suspicion lacing her voice. "They're all driven by power, greed. They just use different words to justify it." Rourke sighed. "Maybe you're right, Maya. But right now we need allies. And the collective is the only game in town. We meet with them at designated coordinate, then we talk." With trepidation in their hearts, Rourke, Liara, and a small contingent of their crew boarded the station's shuttle and set a course for the coordinates provided by the collective. The journey was tense, the silence broken only by the hum of the engines and the constant crackle of the comms. They arrived at a desolate asteroid field, a graveyard of shattered worlds. A hidden docking bay revealed itself in the heart of a massive asteroid, and they cautiously guided the shuttle inside. They were greeted by a group of ragtag rebels, a motley collection of species and personalities, united by their hatred of Kronos. Their leader, a grizzled cyborg named Jax, stepped forward, his metallic eyes glowing with intensity. "Captain Rourke," Jax said, his voice a gravelly rasp, "we've been expecting you. Welcome to the collective." The alliance was formed. A desperate gamble against an overwhelming enemy. The lines were drawn, and the battle for Outpost Ring-42, and perhaps much more, was about to begin. Back at Outpost Ring-42, with Rourke and a few of his soldiers gone, Silas and Maya begin to enact a secret plan. With much of the troops gone, they begin to sneak out on an escape pod to save themselves. In the meantime, Rourke, having made the alliance, faces a new dilemma: how to trust these new allies with his team and the only home he knows. "Do you really think this is going to work, Holt? They're so diverse, do you really trust that each will keep their end of the bargain?" said Liara, doubt and wonder mixing in her tone. It was like the human, Holt had picked apart all sides of the issues. "It's more important to note what all of them have in common, not so much what they are different. We all have a singular objective. They hate Kronos more than they could hate us. A few hours ago, I hated the bastards. Turns out, I don't hate them as much as this collective, if that's saying anything." Liara gave her head a slight nod, signifying that she understood, but wasn't completely sold on his point. It was something for which she knew that they needed to wait. But they did not have much time. With only hours to prepare before the arrival of Kronos' forces, Rourke and the Collective launch Operation Dead End. To further the plan, Aella offered to be the signal for the incoming Corporation freighter while the team and the ships lie in wait. There was a risk to her of the signal causing irreparable harm or pain to her body, but she brushed these concerns aside, to the amazement of the other soldiers who had previously looked down on her. "Why do you trust them?" Holt asked. "I choose to trust you. What you have chosen is a very simple one. You want to do some good in the world, I can feel it. Let's take it one step further and find our home and get this over with," Aella stated confidently. She was proving to be just as good as Holt had always expected, or she was just playing it very well, one could never be sure. The battle for Outpost Ring-42 was a brutal symphony of laser fire, explosions, and desperate courage. Liara, wielding her power with fierce determination, manipulated the station's energy systems, turning the labyrinthine corridors into a deadly trap for the Kronos mercenaries. Kaido, fueled by years of pent-up rage, tore through enemy ranks, his pulse rifle spitting a hail of destruction. Maya, her hands stained with coolant and blood, worked tirelessly to keep the wounded alive, a beacon of hope in the chaos. Rourke, leading the charge, felt a strange sense of clarity. He was no longer fighting for a lost cause, for a galaxy that seemed to have forgotten about them. He was fighting for his people, for their right to exist, for a future they could build for themselves. He was free. Aella's skill and power was beyond anything they expected. She had turned parts of the station into deadly and creative traps using scrap parts they had lying around from years past. Just when all hope seemed lost, Jax and the Collective arrived, their battered fighters weaving through the asteroid field, unleashing a torrent of fire upon the Kronos freighter. The tide turned. The final assault. As the last of the Kronos mercenaries fell, Rourke stood on the observation deck, watching the freighter limp away, its engines sputtering like a wounded beast. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Later that day, Kronos Corporation sent out a universal broadcast. What little news the station got was often years old, but there had never been any signals directed to them alone. Most were just intercepted from various ships running their loops around the galaxy, and a few from the Collective. Silence. The screen sputtered to life. As a matter of official records, we find that the 42-loop outpost has suffered some kind of accident leading to abandonment. As per orders by the Council, no official action is to be made. The area is declared as dangerous, and should be avoided at all costs. That means they are gone, Silas stated as he stared at the screen. They will leave us alone. Rourke looked back at the faces of his people. He knew what he had to do next. I think that means we should make the most of it. There was a collective breath held by each of the inhabitants as the team got ready. The people of Outpost Ring-42, once prisoners of circumstance, were now free to chart their own destiny. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The team worked tirelessly, repurposing the salvaged freighter into a colony ship, retrofitting the mining equipment into hydroponics systems, and transforming the desolate outpost into a self-sustaining haven. Rourke found himself relying on Aella more and more, her intellect and energy management skills proving invaluable. She, in turn, began to embrace her newfound freedom, exploring her creativity and forging unexpected bonds with the crew. She even started to smile, a genuine, radiant smile that could light up the darkest corners of the station. It's been quite a while since anyone has left. When do you think we are ready to leave? Asked Liara. Good question, it's time we start heading on out, to help out those who are in need, said Holt. What do you think, Aella? Aella walked over to the helm, a look of relief on her face that Holt knew all too well. To those who would reach out for help, we should extend our arm to its fullest and give them what they need. It was the kind of poetic speak Holt found himself getting used to, even though they both knew she had calculated the highest chance of success with the highest odds of return. With one last look back at their former prison, they embarked. For 3 years, the Azure Orbit Foundation, built from what was, traveled to world offering assistance, a new way, a chance at self-rule. The years turned into decades. Rourke and Aella, together, became legends. Their story spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring hope and resistance in the face of corporate oppression. With every rescue, with every liberated settlement, the Azure Orbit Foundation grew, attracting more and more followers to its cause. What had started as a small group of outcasts had become a beacon of rebellion, a force to be reckoned with. But Kronos had not forgotten about them. They were the main opponent with the power and numbers to truly hurt any chance of success. One morning, a holographic image was sent, an old contact. It was Alara Vance, older now but just as menacing as before. "I was wondering when you were going to run into me. My lord has been expecting to talk. I may or may not have some plans for you. Let me know what you think." Rourke hesitated. "What do you want, Vance?" "A truce, Rourke. An alliance. I am leaving my old life behind. It's not a hard decision at all," she said, a sense of self-pity ringing. "It's either I die or I serve you." Her words were enough to turn Holt sour, but Aella was ever so curious. The two spoke in private in their quarters about the possibilities of having an ally from the inside. After hours of debating, they came to a decision. They would meet, but wouldn't take any chances. Holt and Liara flew to a neutral world, ready for anything that Vance would throw at them, with a fleet of a few capital ships backing them up. Vance appeared, surrounded by a group of armed guards. She was dressed simply, her sharp features softened by an unexpected vulnerability. "What do you want, Vance?" Rourke asked, his hand resting on his pulse rifle. "I can help you fight Kronos," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know their secrets, their weaknesses. I can give you what you need to win." "Why would you do that?" Rourke asked, his eyes narrowed. "I want to live in a better world. A world where people like us can make our own choices," Vance said. "I'm tired of being a pawn." A long, tense silence filled the air. Finally, Rourke nodded. "All right," he said. "But don't think for a second that I trust you." The alliance was sealed. Two sides of the same war now on the same path. But was it a path toward freedom, or destruction? As Aella, Rourke and their army stood together, she could say with confidence that every world to fall to the Green Alliance banner will be built from that moment onward, for the good for each other. Rourke stared out at the swirling nebulae, his reflection barely visible on the viewport of the reconstructed freighter, now proudly named the Azure Orbit Foundation. Years ago, he'd have seen only a cold, indifferent universe, a canvas for endless conflict. Now, he saw something different, possibilities, potential for connection, and a reason to keep fighting. Not for glory, not for power, but for the simple right of others to choose their own destiny. The sector war, for him, had truly ended. It had been like a band-aid pulled off slowly, with each small bit of pain that slowly grew into the promise of what was to come. With the start of his path, he had no idea where he would land, nor did he plan to be accompanied by someone, much less love them. The scars of the old life were still there, a map etched across his face and etched deeper in his heart, but these were no longer a burden. They were a reminder of how far he'd come and why his new path was worth fighting for. "You're thinking about her," Liara said, her voice soft as she glided up beside him. The bluish hue of her skin seemed to glow brighter under the nebula's iridescent light. Rourke sighed, letting his hand drift to his cheek. "Sarah. Emily." "Yeah." Liara tilted her head, her long ears twitching. "Do you regret it? Staying here? Becoming this?" Rourke smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached all the way to his tired eyes. "Regret the choices I made to get here? To where we are now? No. Because here, with you, I finally found my place. I found my purpose." She paused, a flicker of warmth lighting her black eyes. "And what is that purpose, Captain Rourke? To protect what matters. To build something better. To make sure no one else has to suffer the way we did." He paused, then grinned, adding, "And to occasionally annoy the high-end executives of Kronos." Liara chuckled, a sound that still felt rare and precious to him. "A worthy cause, Captain. A worthy cause indeed." The scene shifted to Liara on the bridge, staring out towards the vast emptiness of the cosmos. Liara, once an instrument to be wielded, was now finding her own voice, her own sense of self. She was a leader, a protector, a friend. But she was also something more, something uniquely Varelli, something shaped by the crucible of war and tempered by the warmth of human connection. She reached her hand out to one of the navigational screens. With a thought, it began to show a simulation of galaxies, Nebula's star, with each showing a world in need of help. The bridge became a flurry of light. For a moment, it almost seems like she was about to do something, but nothing happened. Nothing changed. She sighed. She found that there was still so much to learn about these new changes about herself. She smiled. "You want to make them happy," a voice rang from behind her. Liara spun around and looked at the terminal that Greg, their new AI, once controlled, with his wacky recommendations and general disconcern for all of their safeties. That toaster, that AI, it had gone so far. "I can hear your thoughts. I never could do that before, did you know?" Greg shouted. It never knew that a machine could actually act up, nor did she know that it would happen now. However, with the arrival of the Green Alliance, things had become more complicated. The universe that has been created has new feelings, hopes, dreams. The same for her. The world she now stood in was not the cold, dark prison that she was birthed to expect. The war that they were fighting is now a war of humanity, connection, and empathy. What a concept it was for two alien cultures to experience something so unique and alien. "You didn't have to change so much, Greg," replied Liara. The AI spoke in a concerned tone, but more caring and less robotic than before. "But isn't this what you want? To be more yourself and connect? What do you expect a guy to do? You are my primary direction after all." Liara smiled gently. Her purpose had finally come. She realized the power and capacity she had, with Holt as her guide, and Greg as her compass. She no longer just wanted to follow her new path, she needed to. 3 weeks passed in what felt like a blink of an eye, though Holt and Liara knew their work had just began. The universe felt as silent as ever when they were left alone in that station, together. On the eve of their departure from the station, and their new path, there was still so much work to do. There would be challenges to overcome and dark forces that sought to snuff out their light. But they had each other. And they had their crew, a ragtag family forged in the fires of war and bound together by a shared desire for something more. The loading ramp of the Azure Orbit Foundation extended, touching down on the crimson soil of Arida. They were just beginning on a new journey, to the great unknown. It was not without its perils, nor was it easy to navigate, but it would always have each other. Standing at the helm, watching the station recede into the distance, Rourke turned to Liara, his hand resting gently on her arm. "So," he said, a hint of a grin playing on his lips. "Ready to see what's out there?" Liara met his gaze, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of purpose. "The galaxy awaits, Captain Rourke. Let us show it what we can do." Together, they set a course for the stars.